Hello, everybody. Thanks, everybody, for coming along this morning. So, as president, there's a whole team behind you. You know, it's the whole of council. There's also a presidential team. There's the past president and the president-elect. So, you know, the president is the figurehead, but there's a lot of people in the background doing the work. And I suppose our incoming 2023 president is Anne Kehoe, who's been an enormous support to myself as president. I think she's already doing a lot of the role as president. A lot of the stuff that I'm doing is actually Anne doing in the background. So I think there is no more fitting person to take over as president. So I'd like to introduce you to the PSI's 2023 president, Dr. Anne Kehoe.
Hi, everyone. Fantastic to be here to speak to you all. You'll have to bear with me on my voice. I did a lot of talking over the last couple of days, and I may have overshot my word count, so it's a little bit off. But thank you, Vincent, for such a kind introduction. It's been fantastic to work with you as PSI President on Council for the last number of years. It is a joy to be able to speak to you all in person today. I can feel the sense of community and celebration. Thank you to each and every one of the 450 delegates who have made this trip. The conference is the highlight of the psychology calendar and is made possible by the hard work of the PSI Conference Committee, PSI staff and volunteers. Very, very special thanks to the amazing Lisa Stafford, PSI's Head of Communications, and Dara Greenhalgh, Brand Communications Coordinator, for their patience and attention to detail, because it's that makes this happen. Thank you too to the PSI staff, namely Genevieve, Shane M, Marianne, Karen, Rachel, and our CEO, Shane Kelly, who diligently support all of the work of the Society. I look forward to continuing to work with you all next year, alongside our President-elect, Dr. Oran McCarthy. When I was originally nominated for the presidency, I can tell you that in considering the role, I did not feel like the most presidential person. Perhaps it's because I'm a busy working mum of two very busy little boys. I had a different type of person in mind for the role. I thought long and hard about it and all that the role will entail, and came to the conclusion that perhaps my position could be a strength because I share many of the typical life and psychology career experiences with so many other psychologists. I concluded, what better reason to take on the role and advocate for those of us on this journey and in the profession. I'm going to take a drink just for my voice, sorry. I first joined the PSI 15 years ago in 2007. And therefore, it's a pleasure to be nominated to this amazing role, to lead this organisation that is 52 years old with its extensive history. PSI itself is an organisation of a wide collection of members who work and/or study every day for the benefit of others. I want to thank all the members of Council who've worked so hard over all the years, especially those who are stepping down this year. It's been a pleasure to learn from you, and I hope that you stay very involved. I'm also very excited at the new members joining Council in January, bringing their fresh perspectives and expertise. To be honest, I'm somewhat terrified of chairing a meeting of such an accomplished group of psychologists, but I'll give it a go. There are people here today who know me, and for those of you who don't, I might tell you a few things about myself and the journey that's brought me here. I grew up in Dublin 15, and I'm the eldest of three. I live not far from where I grew up with my husband Sean and our two boys, who are probably actually our bosses, aged 8 and 5, and our cat, who my 5-year-old eloquently named Scraggy Pants Popcorn, which we have to now call her. I went to secondary school in St. Dominic's College, Cabra, for any of you who know it, and where I lived the teenage role to its full capacity. I think that's why I enjoy working with teenagers, to be honest. Eventually, I realised that I was the person responsible for my future, and at the end of 5th year, after much pressure, decided to knuckle down and give the Leaving Cert thing a try. I surprised even myself by getting a place at Maynooth in psychology. In my house, going to college was a thing, because neither of my parents were lucky enough to have gone. So it is fair to say that I wouldn't be the person that I am today without them. Both of them were delighted to see me head off on the train to Maynooth, at that point thinking that I'd made it. I'll tell you a little bit about them just to give you a sense of myself, if that's okay. My dad was an original union man at Aer Lingus who took the most pride in the strikes and picket lines they held there back in the day. He worked as a computer programmer and my mum as a statistician. Definitely both talents in IT and maths that I absolutely did not inherit. But sadly, my mum was very proud of her math skills, often telling the story of how she had to trek over to the local, often telling the story of how she had to trek over to the local all-boys school just for the opportunity to sit in the honours maths class, which was not available at her all-girls school, in order to take this subject in her Leaving Cert. She was an original feminist, and one of my favourite stories about her involves the Aer Lingus entrance exam she took. She arrived late. It is a very strong family trait, confusing the 20 or so other male candidates. She knew they thought that she'd hardly have a chance, but it was her who had the last laugh when she was offered the one job available. She was very proud to have seen the marriage referendum succeed in Ireland, having lost loved ones to lives overseas when they had to leave the Ireland she grew up in. She passed away in 2018, and I'm sad to say that she didn't get to see the repeal of the 8th Amendment. Sorry. I know she would have been proud of me, as at the time I was part of the perinatal infant mental health SIG, who with PSI stood up and were counted on such a key issue for Irish women, having seen the impact on my own friends' care. So, what next? With some help from Susie, I finished my degree. Which Susie, you might ask? Not UCD's or our own, Professor Suzanne Guerin, the wonderful Professor Suzanne Guerin, who I know shares a lot of values with the other Susie. The Susie I mean is the Susie Students Grant System, which provides financial support for students who need it. With no better plan, I decided to do a PhD in Maynooth, where I gave lots of very unfortunate participants in the department way too much literal pain in exploring the therapeutic ways to cope with pain. Some of whom may be sitting in this audience, I know that. My apologies to all of you who took part, and I hope there were no long-term implications like fear of hot surfaces. Oh, hang on. During this time, I worked as a relief social care worker in the Dorset charity for people with intellectual disabilities. I worked there for 10 years, and I know it was this that influenced me to choose a more applied psychology path. Life wasn't all academia, as myself and my now husband headed backpacking for a couple of months, which was fantastic. However, then it was crunch time to decide what was all this college stuff for. What was the point? And then I quickly realised that it was going to involve even more college. So people were quite confused by that as to why it wasn't done yet. I considered my options and applied for the clinical psychology courses, sadly discovering that I was in no way ready for the arduous interview process. I remember leaving one, I don't think I'll ever forget it, round feeling rather metaphorically punched in the gut. And the closest experience I could use to describe it was to people who I knew didn't understand what we were doing, was being rejected from the X Factor. I think it does still feel like that. I realised that I was going to have to up my game significantly. So I worked away in a number of AP posts where I saw the value of good supervision and mentoring. And I'm still struck by the arduous process that all hopeful professional psychologists go through to get a place on their respective courses. To be honest, I think my empathy and want to shine a spotlight on the difficult, vulnerable time for people very early in their career will never leave me, having been there myself. I'm acutely aware of the need for urgent change and continued advocacy on the issue of funding for all professional doctoral level training courses. Back to my journey. Sorry. I applied again the following year to every single course. As many of you who have done this will know what an arduous task that is. There were so many times that I faltered and wondered if I was ever cut out for the role. But thankfully my luck prevailed and I got a place at Queen's. Sure, it was only up the road. And off we went over the wee border to our new place on the Lisburn Road. Over the 3 years, I became very acquainted with the many high roads and by roads of Northern Ireland, made some very good friends, and even watched the 12th of July parades happening just outside our door, which was an interesting experience. My first job in training was in CAMS in Lisburn and Ards, and this job taught me the value of good teamwork. It also taught me about service delivery. So I do view my experience in the NHS as a blueprint for the delivery of timely services, where a 6-week wait for families to attend the service was considered lengthy. Our big move home was sped up by the imminent arrival of our first baby, so back down south we came. I took a post in CAMS covering Blanchardstown and Castleknock, and I'm forever grateful to the wonderful Dr. Ciara O'Keefe and my team for their patience through what was at times a rather difficult second pregnancy. Having my own little ones at home, which was chaotic to say the least, and seeing the true value of supports, I answered Dr. Aoife Menton's call to start the Special Interest Group in Perinatal and Infant Mental Health, which was particularly inspiring while I was actually living it too. My CAMS team moved governance to the Mater, where I worked with the wonderful Michael Drum, who encouraged my interest in gender diversity in young people very patiently. And I am forever indebted to Michael, who minded me with great compassion after the loss of my mum, when I truly needed time to gather myself before I could make space for anyone else. It was sometime later in that job in CAMS that I was railroaded by someone you're very familiar with, Mark Smith, who I'd literally met for the first time ever before a department meeting. He asked me if I was a PSI member and eventually convinced me to join the PSI's Communication and Events Committee, or C&E. Very unaccustomed as I was to public speaking, I actually thought he was having a laugh and decided to give it a try as something different. I don't actually know why. I've been on the committee for 4 years and have since learned so much about the importance of the messages we give to the public and the wider society. I have a piece of advice for you all. I would advise anyone who may be planning to speak or talk to Mark Smith or have a conversation with him that an unintended consequence may be that you end up on a PSI committee of some sort. There are many of us who've had this experience. During the pandemic, I moved to a role providing psychological support to staff, healthcare staff across the children's hospitals, an area I am extremely passionate about. I work with another amazing mentor, Mona Baker, previous CEO of Temple Street. I'm not sure if you know her, but she's one to look out for. Mona is an inspiration in compassionate leadership, and her drive to improve things and support for frontline staff is unmatched. I've also been lucky to provide support in rehabilitation setting for people recovering from acquired and traumatic brain injuries and neurological conditions, which I can say is the most humbling work. I'm very lucky to be able to call myself an adjunct associate professor at UCD, having worked with the fantastic doctorate in clinical psychology team there. It's an honour, to be honest, to follow in the footsteps of so many great PSI presidents and continue their work. We've been through so much in the last few years, and the need for advocacy is so strong that for organisations like PSI, having a collective voice is extremely important and powerful. We have a lot on the horizon for 2023, continuing to progress issues on key matters for PSI members. We will publish, with the help of PSI staff, our strategic vision, laying out the key priorities in line with our values. With regard to the extremely long-awaited work of CORU, the PSI has, and a wide range of member groups and individuals contributed to the process. I think CORU were shocked with the amount of input that was put forward to them about our professional group. Significant concerns were raised, and PSI is happy and willing to work with CORU in planning for regulation in a way that holds the highest standards of accountability for the public, but that does not exclude any professional practicing group. Continued progress will be made on the establishment of PSI's Complaints Committee, which will help the society in upholding the highest standards for members. PSI was delighted to see the inclusion of the HSCP role in the Department of Health, and will continue to advocate for the creation of a Chief HSCP Officer role. The work of our International Liaison Officer will continue to grow, allowing for a greater presence on the international stage. I actually had the very privileged honour of representing PSI in the Oireachtas this year, along with Michael Drum and Mark Smith, and recently followed by Dr. Ethany Longford and Gillian Doyle, and I think we're on again soon in the Oireachtas, which is fantastic to see. Sorry. We will continue to highlight the inequity of funding as a barrier to the workforce and are beginning to see some progress with the recent allocation of €750,000 towards the funding of counselling psychology trainees, which is very welcomed. PSI's involvement with the response to the conflict in the Ukraine will continue as the Society joins with colleagues in TCD in planning and offering supports to anyone fleeing the war. The fight will continue to improve access to the DARE scheme to include qualified chartered psychologists in supporting those applying who have mental health difficulties. We'll continue to work together with HIPSI to advance all issues of mutual interest and strengthen the ties between these organisations. With regard to diversity and inclusion, we'll continue to advocate for minority and marginalised groups. Council have recently ratified guidelines for psychologists working with transgender and non-binary individuals. As a profession, psychology has ongoing and historical issues with diversity, as we do not reflect the diversity of the populations we serve. Real change is needed on this front to examine the factors and listen to those who've been disadvantaged, so the impact of this can be reduced and rectified. Our CEO, Shane, has worked hard to advance the purchase of a PSI property, and these efforts will continue to secure the right property. Similarly, the design and planning of PSI's own digital training academy, which you've heard of, will continue, and the goal of having an easy online platform for members offering access to free CPD events will be achieved. The problems with the HSC's national panel system of recruiting have been highlighted by members and who have continued to call for significant change on this model. PSI numbers are at an all-time high at 4,000, over 4,000. And our special interest groups and divisions continue to grow as they evolve and push for positive change across all the areas they represent. PSI allows for that, allowing members to connect on issues that matter to them and use the greater connection for good. Giving itself is the true essence of PSI, where on a voluntary basis, in their spare time, people give of their time to advocate for clients, students, families, friends, and the greater good of society. It's a place where people fight against the odds to improve waitlists, service provision, and the design of services, who go the extra mile for some of our most vulnerable people in society. We hold the value of giving a little more and the change that we can do, or that we can make when we do. Together we are stronger. I hope that as members, if there is anything that you feel is important to you, that you will reach out at any time to any of us on the presidential team and know that it will be heard and that there is a space to get involved. Join a committee, a special interest group, a working group or council. Now is the time to get involved and develop and shape the organisation. I'll just summarise. Some of my main values, I suppose, include standing for the delivery of good psychological support, which means being present for the reluctant child or indeed any person who comes to therapy unsure if there is a place for them where they can be heard, seen and understood. I stand for showing them with actions, not just words, that they are valued and important just the way they are. I stand for timely access to the care that people are promised at the time when they actually need the support, when we tell them to come out and tell us how they feel or what their feelings are, not having to wait years sometimes. It's not acceptable. And I also stand for protecting psychologists of all kinds who support them, who support all the people that they support, because it's only in supporting psychologists' mental health and well-being that they can continue to perform these very vital roles. I look very much forward to serving you as President in 2023. Thank you all for listening.